ready to
Bomba! Good day, familia. This is Ray Collazo, your host of Bomba Live, the show you've been waiting for. Subscribe to Bomba Live on YouTube or anywhere you can download a podcast. You don't miss 1 second. Literally, not 1 second of these insightful and entertaining conversations con Bomba. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, we're only, 15 months away from 2024 elections. It almost feels like we never get out of the election cycles, and we really try as best we can here at Bomba Live is for this to be a space to talk about Latino politics in a way that's relatable and understandable, and quite honestly, a way that very rarely is talked about in our mainstream media, and to really give people with no chaser what's really going on here in our community as it relates to the Latino vote. And one of the things that is often misunderstood in our politics and by people in the media is the Latino vote and kind of where Latinos are at and how we feel about issues, how we feel about the state of our politics, how we feel about our communities. And I bring experts on the show and people not only that know what they're talking about, but are relatable in a way that can communicate these things in the way we talk about it in the barbershops and the beauty salons. And, we're hanging out on the weekends with the homies and the homegirls, because one of the challenges oftentimes people in politics is the way we communicate things. And so one of our great communicators, great friends of the show, the founder and CEO of Autonomy Strategies, my main man, Kristian Ramos. Kristian, what's going on, brother? Finally, welcome to Bomba Live. It's been too long.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. Longtime fan.
I appreciate you, brother. Kristian, let's start with this. Let's get right to it, man, because, let's start with this. Give people kind of from your perspective where we're at here. 15, 16 months from the 2024 elections. We are taping this hours before the first Republican presidential debate, which is kind of interesting, or maybe 27 hours before. Indictments, people are getting fingerprinted in the coming days. Our politics keeps evolving. So why don't you just kind of give people table set for folks, kind of the political landscape from your perspective that you think would be important for our Bomba Live listeners?
Yeah, let's start from the obvious place here, right? With Joe Biden, you have a president who has effectively cleaned up the mess left by the last occupant of the White House, Donald Trump, who has now been indicted 4 times, has been found liable for sexual assault, was impeached twice, and is leading the Republican primary, not even bothering to show up for the debate tomorrow. We'll probably see a poll bump because of it. And then you have Joe Biden, who has created a record number of jobs, who has overseen stellar job and business creation, who has provided lower health care and has dropped inflation from 9 to 3%. And yet we're tied in the polls right now. And I think, what we're going to see tomorrow is a train wreck. It's a clown car. The problem on the Republican side is very clear. They are competing amongst themselves to see who can be more extreme, who can be more MAGA-like at a time when MAGA politics are toxic with the general public. And on the Democratic side, listen, we just got to tell our story of success. We've talked about this many times. Off the show, we've done so much to help the community. Latinos have done so much to help the community, to the country, and they've done it because Biden and Democrats have helped them and given them the tools to do so. We have to tell that story on our end.
We'll talk later about the Republicans, and we'll talk even in a moment. I really think it's important for you to elevate. Well, you just elevate so important because Latinos have come a long way, baby, as it relates to politics and kind of our place in society. And I think that elevating that part of the story, a very positive story, I think is very powerful. But I do want to go back to the Biden piece for a second. Kristian, everything you laid out is true. And, I'll be honest with you. Let me take a step back. I grew up in Philadelphia. And, when I was a kid, Biden was basically like a local elected official. Delaware's part of the metro area. And, lots of stories there. There was God, I wish there was a picture of it. There was, or some video footage, because when I was a kid, there was believe it or not, there's such a thing as a Wilmington, Delaware Puerto Rican parade. It's the greatest 3 blocks you'd ever imagine. But anyway, there was a Puerto Rican parade in the '80s in Wilmington, Delaware. Me and Biden were in it together. I mean, I was a little guy, but so wish I had those pictures and videos. But I was a Biden supporter in '88 when I was a kid because he was like the local guy and he ran, and didn't work out for him. But my point is that I wasn't his biggest cheerleader going into this. Obviously, once he won the nomination, we got to do what we got to do. But I've even, as someone that wasn't like his, he succeeded my expectations. I thought he's doing a really good job. And then so someone that wasn't like his biggest supporter going into this 2021 in that sense. And now I turn to people who supported him, generally liked him going into this presidential term. There's definitely a softness and why don't Latinos like Biden more? I guess it's kind of the bottom line. There should be, you look at all the data, but I hear it from, and again, these aren't people that, and it's always kind of the same thing. They don't like Trump. They hate Trump generally. They're good Democrats. Their politics are in a good place. Voters, people are thoughtful, but I hear it's just they don't like Biden that much. So, can you help us uncover this mystery? What's missing here that we need to, especially with Latinos? Because I know this is a phenomenon across the board. But what do we need to do better for Latinos to understand what Biden's done over the last few years?
Yeah. So let's take. I'm gonna start real macro, and then we're gonna get the Latino piece. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, historians are going to look back on this period in time and they're going to say Joe Biden saved America from COVID. He saved the economy. He built a durable, strong, lasting economy. In Argentina, the inflation is like 40%. We're down to 3% here. We've created lots of jobs. We have effectively gotten COVID under control. Things have, for all intents and purposes, returned to normal. We're at pre-pandemic levels of employment, a lot of these things, right?
Yeah.
So why isn't this translating to support from the general market for the Latino community? Listen, we gotta tell that story. We have to go out there and we have to be unabashed and we have to say, listen, the hero of this story is the Latino community, and the Latino community should have pride. At the height and the worst parts of COVID, they were out there working, and Joe Biden, he got them a vaccine, he got them health care that was cheaper than it had been before. He provided the tools for them to then create jobs, to build businesses and to work. Right. And that's very important to our community. I and maybe 3 or 4 other people are the only people who are really out there wanting to say that. But it's the truth. I really do go back to this macro thing. When we look back in history, we're going to see that very clearly, like that is what happened. It is to be determined whether or not we are able to fight back the fascism that's been rising within the Republican Party. 2024 will tell us that. But, to now, we have a record of accomplishment, and we have to tell that story in contrast with exactly how chaotic MAGA-style politicians have become.
So when I go this weekend to the bar and play pool with my buddies,
right,
somebody inevitably is going to say, all right, Ray, I hear what you're saying. All I know is gas was cheaper under Trump, and I don't like Trump. I know he's in a jerk, but this is what I'm going to hear. But I had more money, gas was cheaper. My compra, the way Puerto Ricans say their groceries, like my compra was a lot cheaper. So that's all I know. That's all I know, that my buddy was better. So how do you respond to that kind of personal, real reality that people feel?
Well, I'm going to go macro again. Going back to, I'm going to say George W. Bush, but probably farther, Republicans break the economy, and then unfortunately, Democratic presidents spend the next 2 years cleaning up that mess.
Yeah.
And so what we saw with Barack Obama was very similar. George W. Bush, subprime mortgages, all of this stuff that he just let the economy go nuts. Barack Obama put it back together. And then he had to sell it in 2012 in his re-election campaign. And then he put the economy back together in 2012 to 2016. It was thriving.
Yeah.
Inexplicably, we get Donald Trump, who coasts through that, right? He's able to, benefit from Democratic policies as president. And then the one piece of legislation, literally the only piece of legislation this guy passed when he was president, uh, was it an unpaid for tax cut to the richest people in the world, which drove up the deficit, created, imbalance in the economic market, right? Because he didn't do anything for workers. COVID happens, he bungles it completely, right? He does not do the most basic things, and the economy's in free fall. And then Joe Biden is reelected president. Unemployment for the Latino community at that time was something like 13%, 11 to 13%, depending on who you're looking at. Today, it is I believe below 3.9%, right? So that's a 10-point
Oh, we
swing.
all working. That's not the issue. Everybody work. Everybody's. That's the thing, is that the goalposts for Biden and Democrats changes, right? So it's like,
Well,
it used to be
again,
unemployment. It used to be I'm working. It used to be wages. Wages are going up. Yeah, of course, inflation. But to your point, relative to the world, it's not so bad. And now it's about there's another litmus test. Kristian, why? And I'm not saying this because it's a perception. I see it qualitatively all the time. Why is the Biden old guy thing sticking with Latinos? It amazes me, because these are the same people that when they have a problem, they go to their abuelita for advice. And these same kind of people culturally have this, they repeat this freaking talking point about him being this old bungling guy that's going to trip over the nuclear button in the White House or something.
I will give Republicans credit on this. They are consistent in their messaging. So since 2022, Sleepy Joe, they spent a lot of money talking about this, right? Democrats, we can talk about Joe Biden's age, and the answer is, look, the guy's wise. He's got wisdom. He spent a lot of time working in the government.
He's got a good team.
He's got a good team. He spent more time passing legislation than just about any other president in modern history. So to me, this is a strength, right? This is a strength in our culture. It's definitely a strength. You honor your elders, they're the wisdom, all of that is positive. And so we have this absence of any sort of narrative around Biden's age in a positive way. And Republicans are filling it with a lot of negative narratives, which is about all they do. They don't govern. They don't pass legislation. So I think, talking shit is about all they're good at these days.
It is interesting when you see that some of the polling you've done and research you've done, and we're talking to Kristian Ramos from Autonomy Strategies, one of the top political minds that we have. Appreciate you being on the show, brother. The support for Biden is definitely softer than we'd like it to be, and we have a little time to pick that up. But the floor is a little higher. You could debate it, but it's probably somewhere between 25 and 30%, one way or another, for Trump and or a Trumpist person, candidate on the other side. But that definitely feels like a ceiling to me, because a lot of the same people that are soft on Biden and won't commit to Biden, very few of them, if any, ever tell me they understand where Trump's coming from, and they understand the other side's dangerous. Obviously, the women and many people are, the Dobbs decision, I think, was an inflection point as much as anything, especially for Latinas that live in these red states in the South and in the Southwest. But so Kristian, how do we, besides just generally communicating this to our community, how do we communicate this information? Because it's our community is very diverse, and we could have a whole other set of conversations around the Latino male issue, communication piece. And if you want to touch on that, that'd be great. But there's some definite nuances here. So where do we begin with how we communicate these accomplishments and the truer story about Biden's presidency?
It's interesting. Democrats, we have a tendency to go to policies. Nobody cares about policies. Nobody cares about that in their day-to-day life. No,
It's unbelievable.
and this is an emotional story we have to tell. This is a story about pride in our ability to work and to come back from anything. We had a worldwide pandemic, which, by the way, most of the world is still dealing with. And we have come back and we are fighting and we are working and we are, putting food on the table for our families. We're starting businesses. We are out there turning the corner for our country. And that's the story we've got to tell. We have to have a meta narrative about the last 2.5 years. And that's what's happened, right? We've been out there working. We were out there as essential workers. We were providing for the country, for our families, for our communities. Joe Biden and Democrats were there helping. They were providing support. When Donald Trump was attacking our Capitol, when Donald Trump was out there denying that he lost an election, imperiling our democracy, Latinos were rolling up their sleeves and they were working in their community and they were striving and they were making sure that their kids were getting into the best schools that they could get into. They were making sure that they could go and take their kids to the movies again, right? To do all of the things that everybody came to this country to do to be successful. We have got to be the party of success and give Latinos the tools to live their life how they want to live it. And that is buying houses, buying cars.
That's right.
Putting their kids in the best school possible. That's what matters to this community. That's the story we have to tell.
Yeah, and that speaks to the Latino male piece, and again, we're gonna be talking about this piece a lot on Bomba Live, the talk show you've been waiting for, because where you saw some gaps in support for Biden in places like Texas and a few other pockets of our community, is that piece around this idea that Democrats were trying to continue with COVID to basically prevent Latinos, whatever, regardless of their intentions, obviously, because COVID was a real thing, prevent Latinos from, going out and providing for their families. And there's certainly a section of the Latino male community that felt this visceral reaction to, hey, I'll take the chance to get sick because I feel so desperate to try to support my family and feel like I'm bringing value to my family because I don't have the kind of job where I can sit on a laptop inside my house and do it. So we have to honor when our definition of work and success, right? Because there's a lot of homies that, hey, the truck driver in our community needs to be honored the same way the lawyer is, and if not more so in some degrees. Kristian, in your research from a Latino vote perspective, what are people getting wrong about that? I mean, there's a lot of things, but when I ask you the question around what are people getting wrong about the Latino vote in the Latino electorate? What's the first thing that comes to mind you want to share with our viewers and listeners?
So Latinos, white people, brown people, black people, everybody loves freedom, right? And so when we start from places where our community believes strongly we need to protect our freedoms, right? We need to protect our freedoms from MAGA politicians who sow chaos, who want to take away our reproductive rights, who want to take away our ability to love who we want to love, who want to ban books. But then we also need to provide the freedom to thrive. We need to give people the tools to be able to start businesses, to buy houses, to buy cars. Hell, if they want to buy Air Jordans, right? We want to give people the freedom to thrive in that regard. So that's one piece. And then I think the other thing that people are miss about our community is Latinos, as much as we have pride in our culture and ethnicity, we see ourselves as a part of a society, not just as some distinct and separate thing. And so the messages that we have tested that have worked the best and the images you see is not, well, here's the Latino content. It's Latinos within a team of the American society that are turning the corner and making things better for everyone, not just the Latino community, right? We really do believe, I always tell people, it's a multi-generational, multiracial coalition in and of itself. And what that means is there's Black Latinos, there's morenas, there's all sorts of different type of Latinos. So we don't necessarily want, content that's just for them. It's in this diaspora within our own community, but also within the society as a whole. And I think a lot of people really miss that.
It's interesting, Christian, because and people that know, I work for Unidos US, which was formerly National Council de la Raza, and the reason that we changed our name was precisely what you just said, Christian, is that what the community told us, and it was a process several years ago leading up to our 50th anniversary and so we went through this process around identifying getting a sense of the Latino community, what was what they wanted from us for the next 50 years. And it was actually that. They say, we want you to continue to fight for the rights of the Latino community and open up doors of opportunities for Latinos because, to your point, we want to work, we want to thrive, just give us a shot. But we want to do it in the context of unifying. So we don't want it to be us versus them. We don't want it to be combative. We don't want to be isolated. We want to be part of the American story because we are part of the American story. And to your point earlier, you can't be an essential worker and be undocumented at the same time. And from our essential workers on up, the Latino workforce is what saved us during COVID as much as anything. Ironic that the Latino workforce literally does everything. I mean, who are the clowns that I feel sorry for them actually. The two guys that were hiding Trump's boxes in Mar-a-Lago was two Latino guys, and it was an Asian American guy that was orchestrating the whole thing. So without our diverse workforce, you can't get anything done around here, even high crimes and misdemeanors. But my point is that, to your point, that is what the Latino community wants. They want to be respected, they want to be honored, they want to be listened to, but they don't want to be patronized and they don't want to be isolated and othered. And that kind of speaks to our, we're talking during the week that, days after Blue Beetle came out, and the feedback that the Latino community is giving, generally very strong, is that it highlights us, but it does it in a larger context of, obviously, of comics and, and action movies and kind of a larger society. So we do want to feel part of it and we want to be listened to.
Well, so I have a very spicy take here, which, this may or may not get me in trouble, but I've been thinking about this a lot. Did you see Into the Spider-Verse yet?
Yes.
So what was really fascinating to me about that movie, and I'm going to see Blue Beetle tonight. I wasn't able to see it over the weekend. I couldn't get a sitter. But
yeah, I'm going to go see it Friday.
Yeah. Into the Spider-Verse is a super Latino movie.
Yeah.
Into the Spider-Verse really gets at like the Latino identity in a way that I don't think I've ever seen a mainstream movie even try. And these are like other, Latino-centric movies, but it wasn't marketed as a Latino movie. Like, I got into the movie theater and I was like, oh shit, this is about what it is to be Latino in America in 2023.
Yeah.
And so that was a surprise. I went to go see it because, Spider-Man and comics and the brand and all that. But I thought that was really interesting in the marketing of it. And that movie made a gajillion dollars. It's like I think it's the second or third most biggest box office of the year. And so I think that is interesting, even in the marketing of something like that, where, we do need to have movies made for Latinos and by Latinos, and our stories need to be told. But again, this goes to this broader question about the diaspora and Latinos. One thing we didn't even touch on earlier I was talking about, but the research shows very clearly, and I think this is fascinating and is a bit taboo. If there are a lot of people, let's say somebody who comes from Argentina, and in Argentina everybody is white, right? They consider themselves white in Argentina, and then when they come to the United States and people start saying they're Latino, well, they're like, well, no, I'm white. And if you look at the census, there is a very small, I don't want to say very small, but there's a number of folks who self-identify as white. And it's the same deal, come from Peru and you come from a certain social strata over there, and you consider yourself white because it's, they don't have this a Latinidad in the way that we do in the United States, really. And it is bizarre, interesting, take it however you want, that a lot of those definitions came from having to categorize Latino-ness within a white American society. And so that is something that generationally people struggle with a lot in trying to talk to Latinos, because there are some people who don't identify as Latino.
And some of the dynamics where we see in the data that Latinos that either where you see an uptick at times for supporting conservatives or Republicans, and people that push back on racial narratives um, are Latinos that live, particularly Latino men that live in dominant Latino areas. So because if everyone around them is Latino, or most everybody around Latino, they don't see this some of those dynamics as clearly as people that live in mixed communities and I've met South Americans, to your point before. They were like, in my country I was white. When I showed up, I wasn't white anymore. So depending on their scenario, they deal with it. Kristian, what's an issue or two that you wanted to highlight to people here on Bomba Live that you think that you're finding in your polling and research that are important for Latinos, that you think are important for us to focus on in our messaging?
We got to be proud. We have to be optimistic, and we have to be proud of our contributions, and we have to paint an affirmational, forward-looking vision of not only what Latinos contribute to this country, but what do we want? What do we want from this country that we give so much to? And I feel like, what I see in the research and the focus groups, when people talk about Democrats, they say, well, we spent a lot of money and we didn't get anything for it, and they don't have a plan. The irony is, as I said earlier, Donald Trump spent a ton of money on unpaid for tax cuts for the super rich and corporations. Joe Biden spent a lot of money helping working people, right? People were at the lowest strata. Wage earners have seen the highest growth in their wages. Like, that didn't happen by accident. That was very intentional. And so we have to talk about what we've done so that we can point to people what we need to do, right? We've gotten ourselves out of this hole that we were in after the disastrous 4 years of Donald Trump. Now we need to talk about how the investments in infrastructure, the investments in fighting climate change, are going to translate into jobs and businesses for folks. I mean, the climate change stuff is remarkable. That really will change the way our country, the infrastructure in this country, in terms of solar panels, in terms of charging stations for electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. That will, 10, 20 years from now, we'll look back at this and be like, wow, this was the beginning of something very remarkable in our country. In manufacturing, we're making things here again.
Yeah.
Latinos are going to work those jobs. So
Well, we're
yeah,
the ones that are going to be doing it. Yeah, and everything I've seen in some of the polling and research stuff, and I'm sure you've seen it too, Kristian, is that talking about those infrastructure investments and the climate change elements of that are very positive for Latinos, because we're sort of the greenest electorate. We sort of get it. And we, especially our men, we see ourselves as the one that's going to do that work. We're the ones that are going to install those solar panels. We're the one to build those wind turbines. So those are really important messages and important issues to focus on.
yeah. Really quick on that. My grandfather was a construction worker, and he
So was
would
mine.
he
Yeah.
would he would shovel dirt in the Texas heat when it was 150 degrees. What they've done with this climate legislation, job training, right? The ability for somebody like my grandfather to go get training, to then go be able to work a job where he doesn't have to be out in the heat, 100
Right.
degrees shoveling. That changes people's lives. That changes the trajectories of families' lives. That's the story. That's the stuff that we really have to connect it to, because a lot of Latinos families, blue collar workers.
That's right. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we have to honor that, to your point. What's her name? I forget, the woman in Washington is a Latina, Maria Perez Guzenkamp. I forget his
Oh,
mispronunciation
yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah,
But
from
so anyway, yeah,
Oregon,
for Washington State.
Washington
Selena's from
State,
Oregon.
Washington
So
State.
she made a really good point. She owns she's a second generation Mexican American auto body shop owner, and she's a mechanic. Her and her husband. And what she was saying was that, and I think this was kind of throwing shade on AOC, but it's instructive what she said, is that she said, I see my colleagues that grew up like me, and they say things like, my parents worked hard and worked in blue collar jobs, so I could be the first Latina or first person in my family to graduate college, and now I'm this. And she said, Marie Guzenkamp said, actually, why don't we talk more about and honor that person that worked hard? What's wrong with what they did so that you could go to college? So it was an interesting kind of spin on perspective on it, but I think it was instructive.
Well,
And so anyway.
to that point, when I first bought my house and moved out to the suburbs, I had all these trees in my backyard, and I wanted to get rid of them, so I cut all the branches off. I went down there, and I was doing the yard work, and it got to the point where I had to dig the roots out. And I tried to dig one of the tree roots out, and it took me like 3 weeks to do. Like, I would go, Saturday, Sunday, I would do a little more, a little more, a little more.
Yeah.
And then I go to an axe, and it took me forever to get the one out. And then I said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to hire somebody to do the rest. And I'll never forget, this guy came in, and he did it in like each one. He did like 3 in like 20 minutes. And people talk about unskilled workers. That's a fucking skill.
Oh no, they're
That's
geniuses.
really hard to do.
I don't know how they do
I
it.
could never do that
It's
work. I
unbelievable,
would have died.
I
So,
know.
like,
I'm Latino in that stuff. I have no skills at any of those things. I feel bad for my wife because her dad is a master electrician. I mean, literally a master electrician. This guy's one of the first Latinos in the electric union locally back in the days. And he's just he's just so gifted with all of it. He does plumbing, he does everything. And she ended up with me. I can't. Good luck getting me a light bulb in. I can't even pronounce it. Anyway, hey, Kristian, brother, before I let you go, anything else you wanted to share about the Latino vote? And anything you're working on or anything you wanted to share with our Bomba Live community about how we get engaged in these elections? Because yes, it's 15 months away, but this is not going to be a blowout. A lot of opportunities. Obviously, Senate, House is also, in play, but this is going to be a competitive election one way or another.
No political party can win without Latinos. That's it. We should act like it. We really should take pride.
That's right.
Michigan, Pennsylvania, the Southwest, without Latinos, we would not win.
So. Kristian and I are old enough to remember when New Mexico was real purple, even though it's not like solid blue. I mean,
it was red.
It was red back in the days. That's right. It was. And then it went from, okay, wow, New Mexico's purple, but Colorado, whatever. I remember when Colorado was always a little purplish, but certainly not as blue as it is now. Virginia and the Latino and Asian American vote was a big part of that turnaround.
Nevada was also red.
And then it was like, yeah, Nevada, purple, maybe, but forget Arizona. That's never going to happen. And it's all within a generation. And shit, yeah. California. I mean, when we were kids. California. Ronald Reagan.
Nixon came from California.
That was a moderate Republican state. That's what that was considered in our politics. And obviously lots of things happen. So, and all that, a lot of that is because of the Latino electorate and the good work. Most importantly, none of that just happens because of demographics. And there's countless people that we're blessed to know, Kristian, in our network that have been a part of that historically and continue to blaze trails. And, in Pennsylvania, my home state, the net votes that Biden got out of the Latino vote in Pennsylvania in 2020 was 75% of his margin of victory. It would have been in the recount zone without us. So, it's, and that's just one example of all these states. And Georgia, another piece. We're a critical swing part of that. If they invested more in North Carolina, Latinos could make a swing there. So a lot to your point, lots to be proud of. We've come a long way. And, the fact, not a small thing that the campaign manager for the incumbent president is a Latina, of course, from an iconic family, Julie Chavez Rodriguez. We wish her the best. So, Kristian, let people know where they can follow you on social media and anything else you wanted to share.
At Ramos 1841 on Twitter and Threads. And thank you for having me today. This was a great conversation, Rafael.
Appreciate you, brother. And we're going to have you back a lot more. And again, if y'all appreciate these conversations, let us know what you think about the politics. You want more politics on the show? We're down. I try to keep it diverse to try to bring people in and talk about, because all these issues, our culture, we talked about Blue Beetle earlier, politics, kind of how we're feeling as a community. They're all intertwined. So, and we want to bring voices to the table that understand what they're talking about, like Kristian Ramos. Subscribe to Bomba Live on YouTube, and then we can download podcasts. And have a wonderful day.